Okay. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Getting to Know Nuendo. I'm Lee Riley, and in this episode, we're going to look at ways to create, arrange, and modify music by working with MIDI events in Nuendo. Now, this is such a huge topic that I'll be doing as much as I can to get a good job done, but it'll generally be an overview because there's so much stuff to cover, as we'll only be together for an hour. Okay, so let's get started. Right, okay. So, I don't know if you've considered this, but of course, Nuendo is a very, very powerful audio post-production tool, but it can also arrange music. You can write MIDI in it, you can use virtual instruments, you can do any kind of MIDI implementation within this. So I think, personally, it's all I need, for this kind of stuff. As you can tell right around me is what I do. So without further ado, let's look at what we're looking at here. Cool. So we've got some audio tracks. We've got some various tracks. I started putting this together, actually, beforehand. And I created some audio tracks from MIDI itself. So I'm going to explain to you how I did that and what, my workflow is. Let's start right at the beginning by saying, well, you'll notice straight away that we're in bars and beats. Now, bars and beats look a lot different because we have to do everything to a certain tempo, right? We have to do something in a different measure than what we would do in audio post-production, which is time code, or if you're cutting VO or whatever it is, in seconds. So bars and beats is the way to go. Now, also, because we're dealing with linear and musical time base, you will notice that we have, we can toggle between going into a linear and musical time base. So what that does is, this is track specific. It's track by track. So when we change the tempo, if each of those MIDI-based tracks are in musical mode, they will shift with the tempo. The audio tracks generally don't. Once you've got an audio track, you can probably keep that in time base, linear base, sorry, and then it locks in place. Okay. So those are the first two things we look at. Next is the MIDI track itself. I know we've talked about adding tracks before, right? We've talked about group tracks and effect tracks and VCA markers, rulers, folders, and everything else. But now we're going to deal with the things that create music, right? So you've got tempo, signature, arranger, transpose, and chord tracks. Right, so let's start with the first one, which is MIDI. I can record on this, and I have a controller right down here. And that controller is allowing me to play an instrument. So this track itself is going to play back. Let me just play back a little bit of what we're looking at. Okay, nice little song. Right, so basically, we'll just start to reconstruct it, build it up a little bit, right? So I've got the kick. Now, why didn't I just go to the main instrument? Well, I'll get to that in a second. This MIDI instrument itself will have various inputs or various outputs. With it set right here to all MIDI inputs, that means that any keyboard that I have connected right here, as long as it's switched on and as long as it's connected correctly, can play anything inside of Nuendo, or it can play an external device. Anything that is controllable by MIDI is done that. I have a little controller underneath the camera here. Currently, it is set to all MIDI inputs, so it's receiving from anywhere that's sending a signal. The output of this particular track is assigned to the instrument. This particular instrument is followed by all these other MIDI tracks. They're sharing the same channel, and they're sharing the same destination. Okay? We can do controller information. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We can do all kinds of stuff with the MIDI track. It is not like an audio track because even though it has a record arm and you can monitor something and it looks like it has read and write automation, but read and write automation is purely for controller data. Even though that says volume, that is volume controller. That's MIDI controller, right? This is a little bit different. Now, once again, I can go between musical and linear. I would probably keep it in musical. And if I open the channel settings, I'm going to look at inserts, but these are MIDI inserts that these are specific for MIDI controllers. They're not, it's not passing through audio at this point. Okay, so we can't use a typical insert. Our destinations are wherever we determine on the output of the track. Okay, so with that in mind, we have 1 through 16 channels. This is MIDI configurable. This has been the same way since 1983. And there's 16 channels available. So that can choose from 16 different things to play, right? Basically, that's what we're saying. So that is allowing us to do 16 channels of information. Okay, now, if I double-click on this, you will see the MIDI editor, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. There's going to be some more information than just the note information on there. There'll be controller data information, CC information. Okay, so how does it differ from an instrument track? This is the next thing. I could have, if I just mute these, okay, and I go to this instrument. Now, if I unmute the clip, well, let's play it here. So that's the whole kit, right? That's basically the whole kit that resides on here. It is on a MIDI insert, if you will. I have an instrument. That instrument's allowing me to take a drum kit and play the entire drum kit, right? That's just powerful in itself. This is a whole new entity to itself. This is a virtual instrument. This could be a synth. It could be an effect. So this is what it allows us to do. Now, the way I look at instrument tracks is they're dipping their toe in both worlds. They're dipping their toe in the MIDI world and they're dipping their toe in the audio world because they have very similar attributes to both. Definitely MIDI, of course, right? Because it's got MIDI information on it. And it's exactly the same thing as a MIDI track would be, but it allows audio information. Why? Because there's a separate section down the bottom. You can put plugins on there. You can route this across any different buses to different outputs, just audio outputs on your interface. So, and once you open a channel setting, you can look at the channel strip, the equalizer. You can EQ this, send it anywhere, like I said, and affect it just like an audio track. Right. It does have lanes as well, but these are lanes of MIDI, but automation, read and write, now you see volume, but this is exactly the same as our audio tracks. Okay, so they, as it said, it acts like both, right? Let's see. Oh, yes, here's the difference, another difference. Once I've finished with that, I can freeze that. If I freeze that channel, that will allow me to take away something that might be hogging a little bit of the CPU. But that's one way of doing it. I can actually freeze it. Okay, that is automation. That is instrument track. Cool, let's go back and unmute those for the time being. Right, here's something kind of cool. And I'm going to go over here. And what I'm going to do is I've got a sampler track. Now, for those of you, I'm going to take a little sip of tea if I may. Cheers. For those of you who are familiar with using samplers, okay, this is very similar. It is still a track. It's like an instrument track, but can actually use audio to drive the actual sound. So I'm going to enable this track. Of course, I did this earlier. And just to make things a bit crazy, I'm going to open that sampler. And what I did earlier, I searched for some crows. Okay, just crows that you see, you hear in the forest. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to do something crazy here. I'm going to grab a crow sound out of my library, and I'm going to drag it in. And right here, you can see that there's a sample set sample start, set sample end. This is the same as an MPC or a machiner or anything you've got out there that actually chops up samples. And this will play that sample back, right, across your keyboard. I can fine tune it to keep it in tune with the song, because let's have a listen, shall we? Okay, cool. Let's try. Am I going to record that? No, I'm going to record that in a little bit, actually. Then you'll get, well, mind you, let me just go ahead and record it right now. And I'm going to show you how I recorded stuff in a second. But let's take a listen and grab that and record it. Okay, excellent. We've got some crows in it. It is nearly Halloween, right? So, happy Halloween, by the way. So I'm going to save that, and we're going to talk about recording properly in a second. All right, here we go. I'm going to hit save. It's really, really raining outside. This is typical Florida, right? Okay, on to our next thing. Cool. Chord tracks. Right. I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier in a few earlier episode about the chord tracks when it came out in Nuendo 12. But let's take a look at it here. Now, I can add chords by using the pencil tool. That's going to be a generic one. If I go back to another tool here, double click on it, there's two things I can do. I actually record arm it, so I can play into it, but it has MIDI input right here. I've activated it. So if I decide to play a chord, it tells me what that chord is, right? If I play a different inversion of it, it's going to tell me that's A minor with an E bass, right? I can also do this, which is A minor with a C bass, right? If I need the chord assistant, I can use that. But as I said, I'm skimming over this and giving you an idea of what these things are. And I can go through my entire song and map it out, right? It's as simple as clicking on something and deleting it to get rid of it. This right here is going to show the scale. It's in G major, this one. So that will show the scale itself. And this one here is going to resize the little flags, as I call them. Because if you like this and you go to that, you may just kind of lose where you're at. So you can constantly view where you're at. You could actually play back a particular sound with these chords, and it'll drive that track. You can use any monitored track. So in other words, anything that is clicked with the monitor or record armed at this point, you can actually choose the track that you're going to do it on. But I don't like it to be playing stuff. I like it just there so I know what chords I need to play. I nearly messed up on my, because I was laughing to myself, that little, those crows. I nearly missed the G. Anyway, so I usually mute them, okay? But it's there. It's really handy for us to work with, right? And so is the signature track. Okay, my signature track is up here somewhere. Most often than not, you're probably going to be in 4/4 time, right? That signature track will probably just stay like that with that flag right at the beginning, and it's 4/4 time. Okay, great. But there's a little bit to it. You can actually double click at the end of the flag and set your metronome, right? Instead of bip, 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 bip like that, you can make it bip, 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 right? So you can actually do that. Working with the metronome, of course, which we're going to talk about in a second. When you get to, oh, I should have kept that on. When you get to this section, you'll see as a 6/4. Now, in this particular part of this song, I'm going to go to 6/4. Right? So it's back to 4/4 again. So there is some kind of signature change in this. And this will be affected by the tempo track. This will be affected by the signature track. Everything, all the grids are affected by this, right? So this is a way of creating your signature tracks. Now, when you've done all that, you've mapped everything out, there's a nice little drop-down box here that, let's say someone needs a click track. It's not the same as the metronome that's going through the control room, right, and out to the cue sends. This is, you can render an audio click between locators. So you could take the entire song, you can take a verse, you can take the chorus or whatever, and create an audio click track to send to somebody else, or you might use it yourself, whichever. That's kind of handy as well. Right. What's next on our little cheat sheet here? Awesome. Yes, 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 yes. The arranger chain. I've got to stop leaning forward on my mic because I'm going off axis. Right. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay. You noticed at the beginning of this track that we had drum solo, intro, we had a verse. Okay. So those... What I like to do is I like to use the arranger chain, and this is kind of better than markers because I feel there's one advantage, a massive advantage to this, instead of using markers. So what I can do is plot out my song, and I'm going to use this. I could use this to arrange, hence the name arranger. Right, what I'm going to do is use the pencil tool first. And I'm going to draw in my next guide, which is from here to here. This is an 18-bar section, which is kind of strange, right? And then I've got my chorus, which is right there. And that's 16 bars. Now, I've got to get out a pencil tool because if I start clicking on something, I'm going to be creating some more. So when I get into that, I can physically change those to change the length. I can edit those. What I want to do is click on that. Is there anything else selected? Right, I'm going to go and make this green. Awesome. So my chorus is green. I'm going to go here. I'm going to name this. I'm going to name it verse 2. I'm going to name this one chorus, because that's the way I roll. You've noticed in the inspector that down the left-hand side here is showing something a little different. So what I could do from here is just press this. If I wanted to go to the chorus, it goes to the chorus next. Or I could stop it and literally go and start from wherever I want it to be. Now, not just only that, something better. That's great for navigating around your session, right? Really easily. But let's say you've mapped all this out and you're not quite sure about the arrangement of the song. That arrangement of that song is, oh boy, you know what? I'd like to try something a bit different. Arranger track is now, it's activated. So what I need to do is open the arranger. Let's say, for the heck of it, I just wanted to start with the chorus. I'm going to drag that over. I want to go into the intro, and I want to go to verse 2, and then I want to go to whatever, right? I can start building up my song. I can do another chorus there if I want, right? And just start stacking things up. Now, I can click here. Now notice how we start this way. I can click at the top and it'll start just like that. Okay, it'll be ready to play. Ah, I've activated it, right? Why is it not, hold on. What's going on here? I should have started the chorus. Okay. This should work. So what's going to happen is it's going to rearrange. It's going to play the verse 2 second, right? It's going to play the chorus. I just don't want to burn up too much time, right? So it's going to go straight from there, in theory. Okay, so it jumped from the intro straight to the verse 2 and whatever. And I could just test these. I can get rid of them. I could test them. And when I'm ready to, I might do a save as, right? Save this because I don't want to mess with this version. I'm going to go back. I'm going to do a file, save as, make a new one, an alternate version, and then go back and flatten the chain. So now it rearranges my timeline. And now that new timeline is the new song, the new rearrangement or remix of my song. Cool. That's pretty cool, right? Awesome. And to grab all this and to remove selected is as easy as going back to it. I've got to get out of arranger mode because if I don't, I can't place my cursor anywhere, right? It stays. If you're in arranger mode, it's going to stay with what section you've started. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, to talk about all of that is an episode until itself. Right. Tempo track. Now, little story. You'll see in the inspector that we have a few minor tempo changes throughout this track. This track was written by a friend of mine, Xavier Paris, and myself when I used to live back in Spain, back in my early years. And we recorded this on a 4-track tape, right? Those 4-track machines, right? The little tape cassettes that you put into them. Probably some of you remember those. And we recorded that. right? So a little while ago, I was talking to Xavier on Zoom, and I said, hey, man, wouldn't it be great to redo some of those songs again, modernize them, make them a bit fresher, etc.? He says, yeah, why not? Let's do it. So I took the tracks, this particular track, and I didn't map it out fully because actually in Nuendo, you can map it out to the transients, right? And you can create a brand new, like a beat map. That's an episode to itself. But you can go in there and do that, right? But what I did is just do a rough to try and keep each section as it was, so I could put things together. Now, there's just the little tempo changes throughout, right? So with that not being active, you'll notice that some that I did not put into the correct time, musical or linear, and now shifting, right? Anything that is musical is staying where it is because it's on bar 13 where that starts, right? Does that make sense? So I'm going to keep the tempo on because I need it to follow the tempo, and so that the metronome is allowing us, so I can use the metronome, and I've mapped it out. So that's the tempo track, really. Transpose track, excuse me. So if you have most modern songs, I mean, some modern songs now, to keep it interesting, you might do the last couple of choruses and make them change key, right? So let's say right here, at the end of here, and these two choruses, I'm going to use that as a guide. I'm going to go up here and create my transpose track. Right. And at that point, when it gets to that double chorus out, I want it to ramp up and change key. Right. So if I use my pencil tool again, if I click on that tool right there, and I can zoom in, get out of the pencil tool, zoom in a little bit, yep, I'm in the right place. And that ad infinitum all the way through to the end of our sessions, which is way off into the distance. It will start. It's at 0, though. You notice this value at the top left. It's at 0. So what that is, there's no transpose change. There's no change in notes and no change in key at all. So let's say I want to go up one step. So that would be 2. So it's 2, it's in half steps. So what that's going to do is take that up to B minor. Now, I'm going to double check. It'd be fantastic, wouldn't it, if the chord track would follow? Maybe if it's underneath it. We'll have to try that. But anyway, for the sake of it, this is going to kind of sound a little disastrous. Go into G, and it's going to go to B minor. Okay, so what did it do there? Well, it transposed the drums as well. So at one note value that was the kick or the snare is now moved to a completely different instrument. So what I would suggest here is if you're going to do that, make sure you re-render your drums at least, right? Okay, excellent. So I'm going to undo that. And there we go. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to save. Right. Let's talk about the metronome. Right. We already looked at what it was going to do at the 6/4 section. I'm going to go back here. And you know, if I don't have any drums yet, I'm definitely going to need the metronome when I'm starting my track, right? So we've already got through halfway or whatever. So let's take a look at the physical metronome itself. That is the activation. If you notice down the bottom right, that will be lit and not lit. So it's activated and not activated. This is a MIDI click, and I remember early sequences and early anything that's to do with MIDI. Because for some odd reason they didn't have very many different, I think it was the MPCs, I can't even remember now, what kind of started introducing their own audio clicks. Please put a comment in there if you know which one kind of started this stuff off. But MIDI clicks themselves, back in the day, I would have taken put a drum machine or something using channel 10, which was the default, and picked the right note to play back a clave or a rim shot or something or whatever, and use that. But you just don't need to, I guess, nowadays. You're just going to use one of the audio clicks, which you have. The click outputs can go to whatever you choose. Whatever your outputs are set in the studio setup, right? It is very different from the okay, of course, yes. It is very different from the control room. And let's say you're sending a cue send to a drummer or a bassist or someone that needs a singer, anyone that may need the metronome separately. I did kind of go over this a little bit, talk back, and metronome sections are right here. These are individual to cues. There's 4 cues at our disposal. This is different than the metronome that is this. I could send it out of what part of the interface I want and have a completely different feed. Do I need it to click while recording? Probably, right? Do I need it to click while playing? Probably not. I'm just using that just to show you that it's mapping to the tempo. Do I need it during count-in? Yes, please. So if I enabled that, you will see that the icon that's next to that is the count-in. It's kind of like a pre-roll, right? And that is set to bars and beats count-in, right? Because we're in bars and beats. We're not using a time linear count-in. And this is 2 bars, which is perfect. I can set it to 1, I can set it to 2, whatever I need to set at. And I prefer, yes, please follow that time signature at the record start position. That makes the most sense to me. Now, the click sounds themselves, just to show you that, yes, a few years ago, we might have done this. We might have connected something like one of these drum machines behind me or a virtual instrument. But most DAWs are either built in now, right? And especially Nuendo, it's the same thing. But you could have chosen the note that you wanted. But I'm using the Steinberg click sound. And that means I can determine custom sounds, if I wanted, at different frequencies and different levels. The audio click level generally is 93. Now, the default sounds, knock yourself out. I thought it was kind of funny for audio post people to hear 1K tones. Ooh, yeah, probably not. But anyway, it's there as an option if you feel so inclined. That's the audition of the metronome, right? And there it is. Here's the click pattern. Now, if you're doing a do-si-do or whatever it may be, you're going to go 2-2, 1-4, 2-4, 3-4 for waltzes and 4-4 for regulars. But if you're doing a Dave Brubeck song, you know, Take 5, you'll have 5-4 there. You've got 7-4 and all kinds of different time signatures that you can use. You can add your own pattern if you so will. Awesome. How are we doing on time? Great. We're 35 minutes in. Sweet. Looking up there. Everything is great. Is everyone falling asleep yet? Awesome. We're still there. Right. We've talked about all this. So let's talk about recording. All right. What am I going to record? Right. I'm going to use this synth right here. Okay. I'm going to record on it. I'm going to bring this synth up. This is a Steinberg synth, right? And this is the retrolog, and I just happened to pick. Just goes in nice with the flow of this. And I'm going to do like an arpeggiated pluck sound, right? Of course, I can determine, you know, how tight the sound is, how long the sound is. Of course, this is a different synthesis episode completely, right? So I'm just taking a sound from that, and I'm going to record right here. I can put it in loop record, but I don't need to specifically. Right, let's go ahead and record. So I'm going to use a little bit of pre-roll here. Excellent. Right, here we go. Cracks me up, the crow. I can always bring that down in the mix. Let's have a look. I just did it just for the heck of it, right? You know me by now. Anyway, right, there we go. Let's take off the metronome. Don't need pre-roll. Bring that sampler down even more. Just to add that bit of art of noise flavor, right? Back in the day. So yes, those are our notes that we've recorded. And as you can tell, as if by magic, I've deliberately done it. Whatever, right? That's what my excuse anyway. So you will see all the notes that I've written. You will see that we have velocity there. We're going to talk about that in a second. So it's writing multiple things at this particular time. So when I get to quantize, we'll talk about that. Now, let's say I wanted to go overdub that because I need the C and G part at the end of that. I don't really want to put anything in the D7, C, and G part. So what I want to do is there are audio record modes for audio, and then there's MIDI. Okay. What I want to do, I normally always keep this in merge, because what I want is to go right over the top of what I previously recorded without erasing it or without creating other lanes. So it keeps everything mixed and bundled in one. What I've got right here is bundled in one clip. Okay. I don't want to go searching through different lanes. I can also auto-quantize, which if I wanted to see how it felt first, that would be fine. I could always click this button down the left-hand side and hit auto-quantize if I wanted. Right, but I'm going to quantize that specifically in a little bit. But let's go over this just to prove that MIDI record mode. Let's get back in and record over the top. So now it's leaving those notes there. Okay, cool, excellent. So I now overdubbed without erasing anything underneath. Right, that's good. Now, I'm going to show you a different version of record. I'm going to take it out of recording here. I'm going to quantize that in a second. I'm going to tighten everything up. I'm going to go to, oh yeah, the Hallian piano. Here we go. Now, right here, we have this really nice piano. I did mention this in... Cool. So it's a nice little piano in Hallian that I believe got added with 12. Yes. So I'm going to go in there, and if I've already recorded something, but what about recording audio, right? So I need to eventually turn this into audio, right? That's really what I want to do, which I've done here, right? So I need to get there with that. So how do I do that? Well, there's two main ways I can do this, is re-recording and basically rendering my selection. So I'm going to select that, right? And I'm going to go to Shift Option R, right? Which is Edit, Render in Place, just to make sure we've got that. Edit, Render in Place, Render Settings, right? And I can use the channel settings. This is identical to doing re-rendering audio tracks. So it's identical to doing that. Okay. I can add a tail to whatever it may be. The tail mode is off right now. Bars and beats. I need to probably add just a little bit to this because it's a nice piano with a bit of reverb, right? So I'm going to call it piano. I'm going to use the channel settings. I don't need to use the complete signal path. And I'm going to render this. And it renders it for the amount in faster than real time, right? And there it is. It mutes the original. It does not render in inactive though, right? It doesn't make the track inactive, and it does not turn off. It doesn't deactivate the plugin, but that's something because let's face it, you might want to do this section as well, right? Okay, but here is the piano. Let's take off metronome. Okay, there we go. It's rendered, right? What if I wanted to do it by doing it the old-fashioned way, right? By actually physically re-recording it. Let's say I wanted to do some tweaking and filter modulation and whatever and print that, or add an effect onto this and print the effect and the instrument. Okay. Well, it's as simple as technically I have a special output for this, which is called bounce. This is something I created in my audio connections, and that is not going out of my interface. It's basically a mix bus, if you will. It's an internal bus. The output of that, you can't change it there. You would have to change it on your direct routing. So there's my bounce. I'm going to monitor this so I can see it. And bring it back in to play here, and you'll see signal. Right, so I can just drop this in. I need to be in record mode, right? Right, so that's now re-recording instead of rendering that as track. Excellent. Take that out, put that into output again. Oh, not output actually, MIDI master. That is my output. So let's take a look. Edit, render in place. Yes, let's look at my cheat sheet here. I've done all that stuff. Now let's go back to this retro log here. My ARP, my incredible ARP. Now, if I double click this, yeah, okay. It's a little bit behind. It's in the groove, right? That's what I'm saying. So I will just Command A, and that is going to select all those notes. And then I'll just hit Q. Now, Q is the quick key for quantize. Now, what is it quantizing to? It's going to quantize to the grid, right? It's going to quantize the grid type that we're viewing right now as beats, but it's going to be 1/8 I can do this as 1/16, which is probably what I want to do this, because I'm writing it in 16ths. All I'd have to do is hit Q, like I say. But let's take a look at something else. Right up here is a quantize panel. Of course, it always goes behind the camera, doesn't it? There is my quantize settings. I got my grid. Could add a little bit of swing. I can add a certain range that it's going to go to. If we're going in tuplets there. And then if I'm doing this with, let's say we're tuning vocals and moving vocals around, the audio warp would come in handy when it's actually quantizing audio. MIDI control the data, right? Can be done at the same time. So instead of me, well, I can just do it this way, right? I can just go in, oops. And now I'm going to hit Q, and what that does is snap the front end. That's the default for snapping the front end to this. Okay. Beautiful. Completely in time, right? Excellent. I'm really happy. Right. The thing is, how do we quantize something else? Let's go to the quantize end section here. I got this bass sound. And as we look at that, you'll notice that these particular sounds... Right, so they're not quantized yet because you can see them slightly off the grid, but I want them to go to the end of those physical bars so it meets the beginning of the other note. I want this to be kind of consistent and jump between the notes. So I'm going to select everything. I'm going to quantize it, but what am I going to quantize? Right, I'm going to set this back to eighths. Okay. And now I'm going to do something a bit different here. I'm going to go to Advanced Quantize. And I'm going to affect the event ends. Right. Now that snaps the end of them. Now I could have done that manually. Right? I could have gone around and everything manually, etc., etc. I can also, if you've noticed here, the length is showing up. As soon as I select all of those, I can scale that legato. I can apply it. I can use fixed lengths for everything. That's obviously another subject matter, but that gives you an idea of the power of, you can even put an overlap in. If you've got like a pad that needs to kind of overlap a little bit because of your decay and sustain, you need it to sound that way, or a bass that needs to sustain out over the top of the next note, so you get like a little bit of a portamento effect. You probably use that, an overlap. You can actually put your overlap in. Cool. That's quantize. Now, moving along. Let's take a look down here. Now I've got this nice little stage piano here. Beautiful, right? Now, as you notice, there's two clips there. Now, one thing I haven't talked about yet is just simple bouncing MIDI, right? I've got my MIDI information, but I want to consolidate those clips together. Right, so that's Command B. And when I consolidate those clips together, I've bounced it, right? It's not rendering. This is simply bouncing MIDI. So all I'm doing is consolidating or joining those clips, gluing those clips together, if you will. And that's one way of doing that. Excellent. Okay. Oh, continuous messages. Right. I've got the CS80 down here, which if I lost it after someone was just talking about that the other day. Who was it? A friend of mine. Anyway, I digress. and the CS80 was a great keyboard. But anyway, like I said with MIDI tracks, all these MIDI tracks, you can see that there's channel 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is going to this omnisphere, and omnisphere is one of those multi-timbral synths, right? It's multi-channeled. It has 8 channels that you can play. So it's going to play 8 synths at once, if you will, right? A few synths do that. So let's work our way through that, but I'm just going to look at this guy right here. Now, let's say I wanted to do this. If we're listening to this, and that swell pad, I want it to take advantage of the swell kind of sound, like the modulation. I'm going to use the modulation wheel to change the filter a little bit, right? Here we go. Here's the note right now. So I want to record that, right? Now, yes, I can record Lee, you told me I can record modulation and whatever. Controller information, yes. But let's try something here. Let's duplicate this track, which I have as Command Option D. So that means I'm on the same channel. I'm going to the same output, same instrument, right? I'm going to change this. Now I'm going to record the modulation on its own track. Why not? Okay. Don't really need metronome or anything like that. Verse 2, great. That's all we need on that section, right? So there's our modulation. As you looked at before, you have velocity by default. You've got a lot of all this information that you can use underneath the track. As it happens, it is here, right? By default, it shows velocity. There's our CC1 modulation. That can be moved. It can be copied and pasted and shifted and nudged and edited. Right, that's on a separate one. It's feeding the same instrument. I can have filter changes going on. I can do all kinds of stuff. Right. So there we go. Beautiful. Okay. Yes. CC. Right. Okay. I think it's time. It's time for us to record. Unfortunately, I mean, let's go here. I'm going to put my main camera on so you can see me kind of reaching around here to this keyboard down here. I've got a Take 5 down here. Now, of course, connecting to anything outside of the system needs some kind of cabling, right? That cabling could be a MIDI cable. It could be a USB. Now, that USB or MIDI cable could go through a MIDI interface. That MIDI interface is connected and recognized by Nuendo, right? So this particular bass, we're going to take a look at that. And this is going through, this has not been connected yet. So if I go to the connection and choose whatever I've got here, I'm going to scroll down and I go to HST4, which is direct USB into that. Okay. Now, normally, I would play this. You can see the signal, but because I'm running through my Apollo, I've got it muted. The monitor, I'm going to mute it because I don't want to hear it double. Right? So what I'm going to do is I've got a track right underneath it. I just messed up my okay, my lighting here. Sorry. There we go. Cool. I'm going to create this track here. I already have, as if by magic. Enable selected tracks. So now I can keep it record armed, but I want to put it into monitor. So of course this controller is now playing that keyboard. Now I'm going to put this back into... Sorry, I keep clipping my microphone. I'm very sorry. Terrible. Right. I'm going to keep doing that. So let's take a listen to this. You've got to trust me here that my noggin is over the top of where we're actually going. But I'm going to play this and start to record some stuff. I'm moving the filter. Right, let's go ahead and record that, right? So let's drop ourselves in here. Right, what do I want to do? I want to record MIDI. Okay. Right, so of course, at the same time, it recorded the filter cutoff, right? That's what it did. Which, you know what, I should see that, right? Let's consolidate these two first. All right, let me take a look at this. Yeah, there's some extra data in there, right? So all this stuff's been recorded, right? It didn't recognize this as a filter cutoff at first. Right, okay. Now, notice how... Ooh, what happened there? Oh, yeah. Now you see there's some differences in color here, which means there's differences in velocity. I kind of messed up a little bit, which we can fix. Now, if I wanted to record that, well, we'll record that, We'll record it straight to the track. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here by talking about velocity. So let's just record it like it is. Right. So now, recording the track again. Oops, sorry. Should have been showing you that, right? Okay, so you get the point, right? It's basically taking an external synth and recording it in, recording MIDI first and then recording that. I could have done both. I could have just bypassed the whole MIDI part and just gone in and recorded straight into audio if I wanted. Or recorded both at the same time. But that's one way of us bringing in hardware. Right. Awesome. Now, I'm going to do something a little awkward. And it's something I'm not, super duper comfortable with, but let's try it. Let's see how bad I am at it. 49. Bar 49. So we're going to add some snares. So I need to find out where the snare is on C#3, which is here. Okay, so now I'm going to pencil that in. We can use the pencil tool, lines up here. Now, does that need to be 50, right? Oops, 52. I'm going to screw this up, aren't I? I've completely done it at the wrong place. Doesn't matter. Right, let's go to here. There, it needs to be there, right? Let's snap that there. Should have penciled that in there. I knew I was going to do something bad live. Quantize is our friend. I'm going to copy and paste. I'm going to get ahead of myself. There we go. Take this, copy and paste that, etc., etc., etc. Right? So now I'm penciling in notes. Now, I can extend those notes. If these were, for example, the bass sounds that we just recorded, I'm going up and down, right? I'm changing the drum, basically by changing pitch, I'm changing the particular drum. By going left to right, I am nudging them and quantizing them, I just did. I'm going to talk about velocity in a second. Yes, I can change all of them at once, modifying that way. Yeah, on a bass or a synth, that would be a little bit different. You can change octaves, right? So me transposing, let's say, I forgot to mention this earlier. Let me just do this real quick. Transposing, there is that stage piano, that stage 73. It's an octave too high. So what I'm going to do, instead of playing that, I'm going to select that. And right now, this is currently at D4. If I select that, click at D3, you can actually hear it's thrown everything down, not just that. So I've selected everything and taken the root note of that particular first chord, and I'm going to bring that down to that level. I'm going to hit enter. Before it was, oh, okay. It was actually up, but there we go. So now we're all hunky-dory. That's transposing notes. Thunder right on cue. Excellent. Sweet. Yes, splitting out the drum kit. My cheat sheet here. Remember at first I did mention when I did this, what I could have done was taken, right, these notes. Where are we? What is that? There we go, the rim shot. I could have cut those and pasted them on another track. Right, so all your drums can be on one at the moment. There's actually a drum editor. I'm not going to go into that right now. But that principle is, spilling that out onto separate tracks so you can kind of control them a little better, in my view anyway, right? Now, velocity changes. There was one thing I wanted to talk about. And there's a stage piano again. Right here, I think it's too loud. Well, actually, I've just put a great stonking big paddle over the top of it, right, which is here. Let me just change this fader down here a bit. Okay, that swell could come down. Anyway, we're not talking about... Here we go, audio fader. Right, okay. This stage piano, I can double click on that. And as I said, velocity comes up by default. If I select the whole thing, I think it's too loud. So it has selected that section. Remembering back to our automation, which was last episode, right? This is no different. I can actually go in there, scale everything down, treat everything individually, tilt things if I need be, right? So there's no difference there whatsoever. So velocity, now I'm bringing this down. It actually defaults to 100. It can do on your preference, which is right here. That's default. You can change that if you want. That's actually for the pencil tool. Sorry, by the pencil tool. And now I've just modified that. Modified the entire chord. I can go in there and just modify a little bit. But there you go. Awesome. Right. I believe there's one more thing to show. Right. Keep looking up, see if we have any questions here. We're all good. Do we have any viewers? A few. Right. I thought it was important to talk about this, really, because just to tell you that this is built in to an audio post-production DAW. I think it's really, really important. I think it's really powerful. I know at Steinberg, they have another DAW that deals completely with MIDI, but this does what you need and audio post-production at the same time, right? So what I want to do is bring up this backbone. This is a Steinberg product. And I could go in there, and what I've done is I can go to this library, and I've chosen snare number 20 here, right? I've auditioned it. I like it. I've chosen it. And I'm going to go in here. I can add some verb. Let's see here. Reverb, pre-delay. Got a bit of mix in there. It's got like a little tambourine transient in it as well. So what I want to do is just, we can either replace the snare or go straight over the top of it, right? So what is it? Right, let's plop that in there right now. So I'm going to give myself a little count in. Okay, little thing at the end of it. I'm going to quantize that. Okay, I can go in there and slightly move that everything forward a bit, nudge it forward a bit to line it up with the other one, or just replace the snare completely. But that's that. One little thing here while we're here. Excellent. I can talk about this in another episode if you want. Let's see. Where are we here? Oh, is it not activated? That's why. Yeah, so I can add that. I can replace the drums with this if I wanted to. Great little tons of different kits in that. That's great. So anyway, right. I think I've got to the end, at least of my cheat sheet. So I think we've had a great episode here. We've gone a little bit over time here. I'm sorry about that, but this is really near and dear to my heart. So great. So I want to thank you for joining me today on this episode. I wish you a very safe and happy Halloween coming up, and hope to see you again soon in another episode, perhaps. Have a great day.